buildings like this could be and have been built in cities all over the world without looking out of place. By cladding the building in stone, it softens the look of it somewhat compared to the stark black boxes. And it also makes it more efficient to heat and cool, since it doesn't have that exposed heat-absorbing metal on the outside of the building. The stone here, or concrete in this case, provides a bit of insulation in that regard. Now, as we approach the final tick on this timeline portion of the tour, we leave behind the modernist styles of the 50s, 60s, and 70s as we approach an early example of contextualism in Gateway Center 4, the curved glass building up ahead here on the right. Completed in 1983, the curve and color of Gateway 4 mirrors the curve and color of the river down below. Each pane of glass also has a slight bulge in the center. This is done intentionally to provide the overall effect of reflections of the rippled surface of water. All of these design elements put it in strong relationship with the Chicago River. But if you're curious about your own relationship with the Chicago River, then look no further than the massive map coming up here on our left. That red brick mounted to the wall just beyond the bridge there represents the location of this building on that map of the Chicago River, essentially acting as a massive "you are here" sign. Now, 300 South Wacker was just an ordinary black box building at its completion in 1971, but it was purchased in 2013, and the new owners spent $800,000 to literally put themselves on the map. And honestly, money well spent, because we are talking about them today. So credit where it's due. Just beyond the bridge on the right there is a massive building that some of you might recognize as Gotham City Bank from the opening sequence of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. In fact, when they zip line onto the roof of that building, they do so from Gateway Center 4. And at the end of that sequence, those school buses, they go the wrong way down Beyond Street. Now, of course, it's all just movie magic, right? That's not even a bank. This is the Old Main Post Office, completed in 1932. It was the largest post office in the world at the time, and for good reason. Chicago was, after all, the center of the mail-order catalog industry. It's another great example of Art Deco architecture, long vertical lines, deep inset windows, geometric ornamentation. After over 60 years of service, the post office was closed in 1996. It was purchased 20 years later, and the new owners spent $500 million converting it into offices to reopen in 2019. Now that $500 million price tag doesn't even account for the purchase price of the building, but it does include a 3.5-acre rooftop park available for tenants and their guests, which hopefully is enough incentive to get people to respond to those return to office emails, right? Just saying, 2019 was not a great year to invest in office space. Now, earlier in the tour, I mentioned that Chicago was incorporated in 1833, but I also told you that the oldest building on the tour, I'm so sorry, well, we won't see anything nearly that old here on the tour. And you might be wondering why that is. And aside from the redevelopment that is very common in many major cities, we've actually got another pretty good reason for that. Right, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Now, this is going to be the most substantial bit of history that I'm going to throw at you on the tour, because I think it's important to understand how the Great Chicago Fire and the events that followed had a profound impact on the architecture of the city. Since this bit of history, though, begins with a story of destruction, there's unfortunately not a lot to look at that goes along with it. However, I'm about to fit like 40 years worth of history into just under 5 minutes, so if that doesn't impress you, then at least it'll be quick. So the period from July 4th to October 10th of 1871 was one of the driest on record for the city of Chicago, with only 3 inches of recorded rainfall for the entire 3-month period. So when a fire broke out the evening of October 8th in or around the barn of the O'Leary family at 137 West DeKalvin Street, which is just a few blocks to the west here, a number of things would work against the city of Chicago that would lead to devastation. First, 2/3 of the structures in the city at the time were made of wood. Now, this was not a Chicago-only problem. In many rapidly expanding cities, there's not enough time or resources to do stonework and masonry for every building that needs to go up. And so you end up with a lot of wooden structures. In fact, many of the roads and alleys were also paved with blocks of wood coated in tar. The second thing that worked against us was good old-fashioned human error. It was a long, dry period, and the firefighters were understandably overworked, but their response to the fire was timely. It was actually a mistake by a watchman on duty that sent them to the wrong part of the city at the outset of the fire, which allowed it to initially spread unchecked. The third thing that worked against us was, of course, the weather. Many folks thought that the river would act as a natural barrier, at the very least preventing the fire from spreading too far to the east. Unfortunately, 30 miles per hour winds picked up from the southwest, flinging burning debris across the south branch of the Chicago River, igniting several structures on the east side. Some accounts even describe the polluted river itself as igniting during the blaze. From there, the fire continued to spread to the north, where it left the river again at the main branch and ignited the roof of the city's waterworks. That building was destroyed. Those water mains dried up, and with them, any hope we had to continue fighting the fire. Over the course of 30 hours, the fire burned 3.5 square miles and left a third of the city's population homeless. Now, in the days, weeks, and months that followed, aid poured into the city from around the country and around the world. But in addition to that, people came to Chicago to help rebuild. And some of those people were young architects. They wanted to leave their mark on the world, and we needed new buildings. One of those young architects was a man named Daniel Burnham, and just 22 years after the Great Chicago Fire, Chicago would host the 1893 World's Fair, or World's Columbian Exhibition, with Daniel Burnham serving as the fairground's lead architect. Now, the fair took place in Jackson Park to the south on Lake Michigan, and it saw 27 million visitors over the course of the 6 months that it was open. Visitors who experienced the newest of the new, including the first dishwasher, the first Ferris wheel, the first hamburger sandwiches, and the first carbonated soft drinks. But they would also experience the White City, which was the nickname affectionately given to the fair's grounds. The buildings built for the fairgrounds were designed in a Beaux-Arts style. This was a European revivalist style of architecture. They were not meant to be permanent, so they were constructed out of wood, but clad in a mixture of cement, plaster, and jute fibers, then painted white. But it was really the addition of the relatively new at the time electric lighting, which inspired the nickname for the fairgrounds. Not only was the White City a functioning fairground, though, it was also the first example on the world stage of something called the City Beautiful movement. This was a movement by designers and architects of the day who felt that beautiful, thoughtfully designed cities improved the quality of life for both residents and visitors. They did not see this happening in American cities at the time, which they felt were expanding too quickly and with too little thought. Daniel Burnham, the lead architect of the fairgrounds, would actually go on to co-author a principal document for the City Beautiful movement called the 1909 Plan of Chicago. This was a plan that detailed Daniel Burnham's vision to make Chicago a Paris on the prairie. It included improvements to the lakefront, the development of a regional highway system, the acquisition of outer parks, the arrangement of streets, and the development of civic centers. And not everything in that plan would come to fruition, but it would be a document that city planners would reference for decades, and we still talk about it over a century later. In fact, as we go through the rest of the tour, I will point to things that were part of that 1909 Plan of Chicago so that you can see the impact it still has within the city. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Ooh, I'm parched. Oh, thank you so much. Usually I'm very modest, but I do feel I've earned that one, so I'll take it. I am going to grab a quick sip of water here, but I do want to remind you folks that, again, time is going to be closing down that bar about 2/3 of the way through the tour. So please, feel free to go visit him at any point. We're going, you don't have to wait for me to stop time. There's speakers everywhere. You're not going to miss it.